I'm Baillor Jalloh and welcome to our brand new look of African Voices and our first episode of 2019. Happy New Year to all our viewers first of all. And on today's show we're going to be focusing on the Democratic Republic of Congo. As many of you will know, they recently had their elections, and also the recent violence that happened in Zimbabwe, which started on Monday. And I don't know if many of you have been watching the reports. Since Monday, there has been protests across the country for the increase of fuel in Zimbabwe. And also later we will be looking at Sudan, which for the past couple of weeks, there has been unrest as well. But before we get there, I would like to introduce our guest. First of all, if I may start, as they always say, ladies first. That is Chihana, who is our political analyst for today, and she will be helping me analyze some of the things that has been happening that I've just mentioned. Welcome, Tchiyiwe.
Well, thanks for having me today.
And next to Tchiyiwe, as you will know, is our political guru and MDC spokesperson for their president, Nelson Chamisa. That is nobody but Dr. Nkululeko Sibanda. Welcome, Doc.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. As I mentioned, today is a day that we've got a lot to discuss about, but we'll first start with Zimbabwe, which many of you have seen probably on your TV screens for the past couple of days. Protests has been going on and there has been deaths. The reason being there has been an increase of fuel in the country by more than 100%. And many Zimbabweans are angry and they have took to the street to vent their anger on the price hike. So if I may start with you, Dr. Nkululeko Sibanda, you are from the MDC, which is the opposition party in the country. What led to the situation?
Well, look, we had an election in which you ended up with Mnangagwa's government, and we contested the result. But throughout the campaign, President Chamisa had laid out very clearly the fact that Mnangagwa was not going to be able to run the country and do so effectively in a way that provides security for everybody. And I think that is why Zimbabweans voted for him by 2.6 million votes, as compared to Mnangagwa's just about 2 million votes. What we say then is what now seems to obtain. You have a president of a country who declares that he has increased the price of fuel. Look, it doesn't take, you have to be completely out of your brain to hike or increase the price of fuel by 250% overnight. Because what that does is that fuel underwrites everything we do in an economy. Fuel, that's why it's called fuel. It fuels the economy. And when you increase the price of fuel, you increase the price of everything. And so the real impact of 250% increase is that what people feel is as if you've increased it by 20,000, because you're going to increase the price of bread, the price of your bus fare to work, you're going to increase the price of a cup of tea, you're increasing everything basically. And what that has done is that people have responded by saying, we were already disenchanted by what you did with the elections. And let me say that the way Mnangagwa did this underwrites what we say, that he was a carefree individual who never cared about reason and talking to other people. And people have protested. Mm-hmm. And in the protest, what you've heard is that while the people started protesting peacefully in the morning, he threw in the army in plain clothes with guns, AK-47, and he started shooting people. People responded by blockading roads to make sure that these people don't get to them. So it's 6 months after he killed 6 people in August, and he's come back now to kill another 6 people. That's what we think, and that's terrible. It shouldn't happen in any continent. It shouldn't happen to any human being. It shouldn't happen in our time.
So Tchiyiwe, if I may just bring you in as well, you've seen you've heard what Dr. Nkululeko have just said, and from what he mentioned, the price hike, according to the government, their justification is they had to increase the price of fuel in order to stabilize the economy. And prior to the election, they mentioned there were challenges, and those challenges had to be settled. So what's your take on all this situation?
I think it's really sad that people have died in the face of a peaceful protest, to start with. So condolences to the families that have been affected by that. I think under no circumstances should that ever happen when people protest. They have the right to protest. I haven't really looked into how the protest came about, but I do know that it was quite well organized. I don't know whether there was a police permit, what the requirements are in Zimbabwe, but people do have the right to protest. And I think rightfully so with this particular situation. Fuel hike, as Nkululeko has already explained, means a hike in everything basically across the country. So in the sense of the justification that has been made by the Mnangagwa government, I'm not too sure I actually agree with the analysis. Of course, there can be challenges. Zimbabwe, as is another country right close to it, Zambia, is landlocked, and so sometimes accessing and sourcing oil can be quite a costly venture. But when you look at the global prices of oil and other countries that are similar to landlocked countries within that particular space, I'm not sure whether this was actually the best way to stabilize Zimbabwe's economy, which has obviously suffered tremendous affliction over the years. Primarily maybe because of what the circumstances within the government historically, but also there have been sanctions as well that have been imposed on Zimbabwe that have affected. So it's a long-term, more complex issue than just saying it's this one thing that's affecting the economy.
Well, listening to what you've just said there, I totally agree with you. In terms of looking at what the government is saying and looking at the history of that government as well, the way things have been over the past 10 years. Zimbabwe has been facing quite a lot of challenges. I'm not saying that justifies the price hike, but in terms of the way the economy is running, the country is really struggling. And as we're talking now, Mr. Mnangagwa is in Russia looking for means and ways how to stabilize the economy. But having said all that, do you think the best way for people to do things is to get out of the street and start causing violence? It may not be necessarily the best way if you look at it within a 1 day, 2 day context. So I think your question refers to this fuel hike was announced within the last 10 days, and the protests responded to that. So I think it's a case of looking at the social, political, economic situation of Zimbabwe, and historically, and how long it's been going on for. You have to remember that the government that has gone back into running Zimbabwe is still the government that was there, and actually the wings beneath Mugabe potentially was Mnangagwa himself. So the protests, I think, are not just for this one thing, but I think they respond to different aspects. But in terms of should that have been the response, the people of Zimbabwe would know better how to respond to that. But I personally think it's huge. I mean, fuel is huge. Okay. Yeah. Well, Nkululeko, the opposition has been accused of fueling the riot or bringing in protesters in order for them to cause trouble or to cause violence. So what can you say, being part of the opposition? How will you respond to that?
Mr. Baillor, my blood boils. I've been an oppressed person for as long as I can live. I survived death under Mnangagwa's Gugurahundi at the age of 7. And the only way, and I'm a black person, and I know that millions of black people in the United States were second-class citizens until the 1960s. In my own country, there was apartheid, where a black person couldn't walk on the street. They had to walk on the road, couldn't walk on the pavement. And they were second-class citizens. And I hail from South Africa, where apartheid was the mainstay. And there's one thing I know. I have a lot of respect for demonstrations, public demonstrations. They mean that Obama, a black man, could become president of the United States. They freed South Africa without an armed struggle, an outright armed struggle. And I don't always see them as violence. I see them as a means for those who are oppressed to express themselves and to get their government to change.
True, peaceful demonstration, but going to the street, burning tires, burning buildings, that's not justifiable, is it?
Look, you know, in the art of running a state, there are things that will always be real, and it will be troubling if we always look at the simplified picture. The people who are burning tires are the same people who burned our headquarters last night.
I'm going to come to that in a minute.
Let me tell you why they do that. Let me tell you why they come into peaceful demonstrations and cause violence, to give the state the excuse to kill. They've done this for a millennia. They did this in the United States. They did this in South Africa. The people who cause violence are the people with an agenda. The people that have an agenda do that. And if you're looking at the situation in Zimbabwe, to describe the violence as the one that you see being carried out by the protesters even, is to do injustice. Because there is no worse violence than the murder of a person. And in this case, we had 6 people that were killed. That is the ultimate violence. If we're even going to talk about violence in these demonstrations at all, we must talk about the 6 people who have been killed before we can scale down to the 5 cars, before we can scale down to the 2 buildings, because human life is sacrosanct and must be seen as that, and nobody should for any excuse do that. Even our laws do not allow you to kill people. You apprehend them. If you find them committing a crime, burning a car, you apprehend them, arrest them, take them to a court of law.
So in terms of this demonstration, was it called by the opposition?
It wasn't. It was called by the workers' movement. And it doesn't have to be called by anybody. The people of Zimbabwe were feeling the pinch, and they move in. So the argument that is being sponsored by the state, which suggests that for some reason it is criminal to protest against this government, it is evil to protest against this government, does not do anybody any good. If we'd done that, you would still have segregated schools in the United States.
So in terms of your headquarters that was burnt yesterday or on Monday, do you know who burnt it? Or?
The same people who were burning buildings during the day.
When you say the same people, because according to what the security minister is saying, Owen Kumbe, he said he can confirm that the headquarters of the MDC has been burnt, but likewise the headquarters of the ZANU-PF as well. So if you are saying as well it is the ZANU-PF who did it, why would they burn the ZANU-PF building? My brother,
I have a sterling record as a human being. My record is demonstrating for the rights of others. The president of the MDC is a sterling record, President Nelson Chamisa, fighting for people to have a right to life. He's been beaten, left for dead himself. He spent all his adult life fighting to make sure that we all see each other as equal, as human beings. But Ncube, the guy you're talking about, has a record of violence, has a record of killing people. You are better off listening to me, listening to President Nelson Chamisa, who has killed no soul, than listening to Owen Ncube. Yeah. He's been killing people looking for gold in Kwekwe. And he says that to serve his interests, because that's what he's always done for all his life.
Chiwe, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Nkululeko, perhaps, I think what I would like, and probably a lot of people who don't exactly have a clear picture, is to get a bit of context in the sense of, so it was military action as well. At some point, we got military action where the protesters were. And you also had protesters, obviously, well, allegedly, protesters themselves causing a bit of mayhem. But in terms of the military, the security presence that was there, what triggered that? Was it something that was called, was it that the protesters themselves called for protection against other people, or was it that the government itself sent security to? Well,
but we know that they always do that. Let me just say, even the people that, it makes my blood boil. The people who cause violence in Zimbabwe, who have the tenacity to do that are members of the state security, because they have the tools for violence. They have monopoly over violence, and they come into demonstrations, start throwing stones and that sort of thing, in order to allow their other friends to come and beat up members of the public, and to prevent demonstrations from taking place. I don't see why we should even, I think we've given a lot of time to the, I think, nonsense peddled by the government, that those people who wanted to demonstrate are the same people who were then attempting to get the demonstration stopped by the military by causing any violence.
Actually, that's not coming through a lot. I don't think we're giving weight to that. We're trying to get a clear picture. And I think you've had a bigger platform to explain the other side of this, as opposed to what we're seeing in mainstream media, I suppose. So this is your chance as well.
Yes, and I think that it is important for our listeners to understand that any narrative, you have demonstrations in any country on earth, and these are designed as a way for society to express itself. But what you don't have elsewhere in the world, which is why people can afford to have demonstrations that are regarded as peaceful, is that you don't have the state coming in heavy-handedly, killing people as it wants. Today, you have people who have stayed away from work in Zimbabwe. And what do you have? You have the military shutting out the internet.
Right, okay.
And you have the military going into residential areas under cover of darkness, because there is no internet, pulling out people from their houses, beating them up and arresting them. What is a person sitting on a couch at home watching television done? What violence have they committed for them to be arrested and harassed like that? Okay.
Talking of the internet though, how are people surviving with the internet being shut? As you know, these days each and everyone communicates through the internet.
Look,
and for people like you who are here in the diaspora, how are you getting in touch with family members?
Look, that's the most difficult part. The greatest problem we have today is that when they shut out internet, what they've done is they've shut families from each other. They've shut everybody out, simply because they want to be able to go in and do what they want to do without necessarily having any coverage. Which is why part of the reason that we have to get onto the media is to shine a light on the situation. I can tell you it's unbearable. It's unbearable for two reasons. The first one is that you clearly know that you're now vulnerable when Mnangagwa's government doesn't fear camera. When they deployed the military yesterday, we are friends in the military. They rang me and said, look, we have 5 orders. With 5 orders. One of them is, by the end of the day, start arresting and harassing leaders of the opposition and leaders of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions.
Talking of you having friends in the military, can I just ask you this silly question? It might be, but these military men or these men in uniform, they should be Zimbabweans.
Yeah.
So how will they, or how can they justify being ordered to go and kill fellow Zimbabweans?
Yes, this is where people need to understand why this is crucial. Zimbabwe is being run by a clique of military guys who benefit from the corruption at the very highest level. So one of the guys who's been spotted shooting people yesterday is a personal friend of Mnangagwa. So what he's done is he's picked his best friends from all the sectors, from all the militaries, and they don't trust the military. They don't trust the police, which is why they're using personal friends to go and do this killing in the name of
just 2 years
friends.
ago, sorry to interrupt you there, but just, if I'm not mistaken, nearly 2 years ago, after the overthrow of Mugabe, a year ago, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, people were dancing to the military, people were praising the military. So, coming back to your point, at that time people were happy with the military, that Mugabe was gone. But now we don't have much time. So what do you think should be the solution to this?
Well, look, we need to be more clear-eyed about what it is that will save Africa from its curse. Africa will be saved from its case. And I'm talking about this because we're going to talk about DRC in a moment. When we become very deliberate about our discussions of its problems. Mnangagwa comes in as one of the strong men in Africa, not as a man with ideas. People keep saying give him a chance, when in fact the guy has been in government for 40 years, and we know what his character is. Let me let out something here that a lot of people may not be wanting to let out, because they've got things to protect. You see, we had so many problems with Mugabe, but this guy was very clear. He was opposed to the opposition and fought the opposition day and night, partly because he believed the opposition was working for the United States, for the United Kingdom. Okay, he had some idea about why he disagreed with you. These guys, on the other hand, they have no idea. They just want to stay in power, that's all, which is why in the 38 years that Mugabe ran that country, which were terrible years, you never had protesters being killed at the rate we are experiencing now. Because part of his agenda was that he had a justification.
So in another way around, are you saying Mugabe was far better?
Comparatively. Comparatively. For at the very least, he had an argument with you. If you go to him and say, why are you doing this? He will say to you, look, these guys are sent by my enemies, by the Americans and the British. Okay? If you go and ask Mnangagwa, now, why are you killing people? He doesn't know. I just want to stay in power, guys. That's all. And people who are like that, you know, you're like being run by a group of baboons with guns. They'll just shoot when they think you will attack them. It's a crisis.
It's also important to remember that with a lot of the nationalists that fought for independence across the African continent, they had good ideas. They had something to fight for. And what they came in with was the vision of emancipation. So it's beyond emancipation now, the vision beyond that. I think that's what held people like Mugabe back. Like, he was thinking about emancipation the time he came into power, but beyond that, how do you take that forward? And I think that's what has limited a lot of the leaders that were nationalists at the time.
Well, we've got less than 3 minutes to finish off with Zimbabwe. So in terms of solution, we know here yesterday as I was watching, the price hike, if I'm not mistaken, they were about $3-point-something per liter.
331. The most expensive liter of fuel in the world.
In the world.
Yeah.
So briefly, so how do you think it should be tackled? What do you think should be the solution?
Well, if you look at the problem as a fuel problem, then you will have a problem finding a solution. The problem is a problem of political leadership and economic management. For as long as there is corruption, there's no way you're going to avoid that, because the state has no money. Mnangagwa, his family and his friends are taking all the money out to buy jets, to put grass on private jets and all that sort of thing. So you will have a problem. President Nelson Chamisa has given a solution that's clear. He says, look, there are 5 things you ought to do. You ought to have a national dialogue with everybody who's involved, labor, political parties, churches, everyone who has an interest in the country, and everybody who's organized. Make sure that you talk about how to normalize political relations. Make sure you talk about how to make sure that every election or election laws are aligned so that they bring credible results. And then you've got to strengthen...
Just summarizing.
Commissions. I'm summarizing. Yeah. You have to strengthen commissions such as the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Human Rights Commission, and the Electoral Commission, so that they're completely independent. When you do that, you'll have free and fair elections. Everybody who is corrupt will be arrested. Therefore, your economy will rise, because you need what you call confidence in the government, but you also need to stop corruption in order to move the economy forward. Okay, that's well understood. And yourself, Tchiyiwe, just a quick one.
I do think that the dialogue process has got to be had. Everybody's after the interests of everybody else in a country, and I think usually the breakdown in communication leads to a lot of things like what is happening at the moment. We need to talk to each other.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for tonight, so we're going to leave it there in terms of Zimbabwe. But to our viewers out there, thank you for watching. Until next week, that was African Voices, and I'm Baillor Jalloh. Hello, I'm Baillor Jalloh. Thank you for watching African Voices on our YouTube channel. You can watch more of our contents by clicking here, and don't forget, you can also subscribe by clicking there. And every Wednesday, we're on Sheffield Live from 8 p.m. till 9 p.m. Thank you.